Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new day on Press R and a new topic. A topic not like any other. Today we have sports in Cameroon, the end of the sporting season, and we decided to go for sports, but not to go for sports on the pitch, but to go for sports that goes beyond the pitch. Sports as a leading soft power. A sports not taking the place of the power, the hard power. When we're talking about hard power, you know, at one point in the 20s and 40s, Germany almost conquered the world with war. America has known to have all the weapons that you know in the world. Russia doing the same. But there is one thing we call today soft power that doesn't go with war, it doesn't go with sanctions. It is called soft power. ICTs, soft diplomacy, and so much more. The persuasion power that does not go with cohesive power. That's what we're talking about, and sports is one of them. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Just stay there and you see what we're going to talk about, the thing that sports can do in the world, even place you above all other powers in the world. And to talk about this subject, we have people who have political ability, we have people who are internationalists, we have sports analysts. Let me introduce to you the panel, beginning with Raymond Elume. Raymond Elume is a sports analyst. Welcome to Press R Set today, Raymond.
Thank you very much for having me, Killian.
Yes, we are honored to have you on Press R. Next to you is Paul Yombo. Paul Yombo is an international relations expert going to tell us what sports can do around the world. Welcome to Press R today, Paul.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and I just crossed over to my right to welcome you, another Paul Anchang. Paul Anchang is a political analyst, and he's going to tell us how far sports can overcome power, the hard power or political power. Paul, once again, we're happy to have you on Press R Set.
Thank you, Keelan. Thank you for having me, and also happy Sunday to all those in the Anglophone regions and on the national territory.
Albert Njembonde, he is someone who is the master of everything, and I should say he's a jack of all trades and master of all. I like to call him that way. If you want to defy what I've said, come on and let me see how you're going to beat me. Albert Njembonde has done sports around the world. He is the head of political service, CRTV radio right now. Albert, you're welcome to Press R.
I'm glad to be home.
Yes, home is home, and your home is here. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here with us. Ladies and gentlemen, watching us from your homes, we promise it's going to be a heated but also very enriching and an intellectual affair that all of us are going to learn from. First things first, what did the paper say in the past week? Manuela Vemnui has been reading the papers for us on Press R. Manuela.
The press week ending was marked by a plethora of news stories that got readers turning newspaper pages. Cameroon Insider sees the indomitable Lions still searching for their claws after two friendly matches. An idea Cameroon Tribune concurs that the Lions have grounds to cover and insists the time to right the wrongs is now before the World Cup begins. Even though Lions show marked improvement despite defeat in their second friendly against Korea, according to the Guardian Post, Cameroon Tribune says there is need for adjustments, especially as their group opponents in World Cup send danger signs in the Guardian Post. Signs which are also seen by Cameroon Insider that Right's opponents send strong warnings. At the time, the 2022 Cameroon Cup final is being prepared with authorities and clubs finalizing preparations ahead of Sunday's clash. In the Guardian Post, Cameroon Insider says it will be Coton Sport against Bambutos on Sunday, and Bambutos FC supporters take over Yaoundé ahead of the final in the Guardian Post. The female volleyball team of Cameroon registered third consecutive defeat in the ongoing FIBA Volleyball Women's World Championship in Cameroon Tribune. The crises in the Northwest and Southwest regions feature at the 77th UN General Assembly as Cameroon appeals for more international support for the reconstruction efforts in Cameroon Insider. To the Guardian Post, Biya's envoy at the UN General Assembly begs international community to support peace initiatives in the two regions just when 3 BBH workers are arrested for treating wounded separatist fighters in the horizon. Then workers of the Banso Baptist Hospital threaten strike against military over arrest of colleagues in the Guardian Post. Then CBC declares 3-day prayer and fasting for the arrested on the horizon. But more troubles hit BBH as suspected Amber fighters then kidnap 4 workers and saw field pastor in the Guardian Post. Coming when a Francophone politician says an Anglophone president cannot fix marginalization problem in the Post newspaper. Southwest Regional Assembly then 6 more partners in move to accelerate decentralization. Public gatherings are banned in Mezam division ahead of October 1 in the Guardian Post. And as Pope Francis appeals for release of kidnapped Catholics in Manthe in the Eden, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres reiterates needs for dialogue to end impasse in armed conflicts in the Northwest and Southwest in the Guardian Post. Then outgoing French ambassador to Cameroon reviews achievement with the President of the Republic in Cameroon Insider at a time there are major appointments in the defense forces in Cameroon Tribune. Cameroon then negotiates new debt reform for Sonora in Cameroon Insider. And Amadou Ali, one-time Vice Prime Minister, dies in the horizon. Cameroon Tribune states that the one-time Minister of Justice and Keeper of the Seal died at age 79. Let's now end our press review with a story in Echo Outlook where water in the Moninguba Twin Lake in Kupe Moninguba division of the Southwest region has been restored. The water last August 24th turned brown and dead fishes were discovered in one of the lakes. According to Olive Ejang of Echo Outlook, traditional rulers of Bangim, after an emergency meeting, commissioned Chief Gottfried Sambele of Puala, a closest village to the lake, to carry out traditional rites on their behalf. 2 days after these rites were performed, the water reportedly changed to normal, with fishes swimming in the lake once again. Until I come your way again, this is your Hour with the Press.
Thank you very much, Emanuela Vemnu. Next week, ladies and gentlemen, we hope to have another person, Yoti Lisonge, Kale Lisonge. Emanuela will take some time off and come back, say, after 1 month with Press Review on Press Hour. For now, we're going to reintroduce the topic for you, sports as a leading soft power. But before we get to the core of the matter, sports as the leading soft power, we are at the end of the sporting season in Cameroon, and we know that 2 big teams mobilized by their fans, by their towns, by the whole country, Coton Sport of Garoua and Bambotos of Buda, are bracing up for the cup final. As we speak, El Rotna lead to the Omnisport Stadium in Yaoundé, the Amado Ahidjo Stadium, if you like. Now, we are going to start with the end of the season. We start with you, Raymond. The type of fanfare that we see at the end of this sporting season that ends today is what we used to have in those days. Everybody excited. What accounts for this?
Well, what accounts for this is that you have 2 teams which have a huge following. I mean, this is my view, but if you look at the history of sports in this country, in the 60s, we had mostly littoral teams dominating. 70s and 80s, most of the teams were from the center region. Then in the 90s, it went to the teams from the west region. And then in the 2000s, still what we are seeing today, for example, Coton Sport has been leading the sports movement for the past 15, close to 20 years. So it's mostly in the north, but it doesn't mean that there haven't been sporadic victories for other teams here and there. But
those are the facts, yes, as a sports analyst.
Yes, but
there's something that has made it to shift the way you have presented?
Well, nature, nature has a way of regulating its own issues. I mean, we find it elsewhere. If you look at even the AFCON, you will notice that most of the countries which were in East Africa or in West Africa dominated the early years. Look at Ghana, for example. Since 1982, Ghana has been looking for that elusive title in the AFCON. If you take all countries like Ethiopia, which were the founders of football on the African continent, where are they today? So, I mean, nature has a way of acting how it is, but it also has to do with commitment and how you invest for the future. Unfortunately, all these leading teams from the 60s till the early 2000s did not invest in the future. And the only team which has been constant since the 2000s till today is Cotton Sport.
Okay. Albert, I cross over to you at the end of the set. You have been in the core of sports for over 20 years, I want to think, or for about 20 years. When you look at the end of this season, that's what we are talking about now. The euphoria that we have this season, we've not had it in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. What explains this?
Well, football is a game of the people, and when the people have the impression that they are included in the management or the day-to-day activities of the team, it happens the way you see it. Bambutos is a club that was created long ago, and for over those years you just needed to see how attached communities are to the club. It's not an issue of just those who are from the West region who love football. You have people who have been mobilized and they see it like this is a flagship of the division. So you have even Jangi groups, cultural associations that have been mobilized just because they see this as a moment for not only Buddha to shine, but the entire Bambutos division. First of all, the name of the team tells you that it is a team that is the flagship of the division. And that is where we have quite some problems with other teams. You saw the euphoria behind Opopo of Victoria, our good old Limbe, because everybody sees that, okay, yes, Njalakwan is a good team, but everybody knows that it's a team that is attached to an individual. When you say Victoria United, everybody understands that it is a team that belongs to the club. We used to have many of such. And then you have corporate involvement. Cotton Sport, everybody knows, is a team. Yes, it's a team that represents the North and Garwa in particular, but everybody knows that it's a team that is managed by a corporation, by a corporation with the investments that can easily come in. And also because they looked into the future, like he was saying. Cotton Sport is one of the rare teams that has youth clubs. That has invested in infrastructure. We celebrated Canon Tone years back. They don't even have a headquarters. Can you imagine that? They don't have a stadium of their own or a pitch that is worth the name, So all of those things obviously count to see what they are seeing.
Well, someone will say that, okay, since they are already near the stadia, like the Omnisport Stadium, when you don't have that interest to go fishing or foresting when you have it at home. Now, Paul Anchang, from a political perspective, how do you explain the mobilization this time around sports?
I think the dynamism, first of all, is what's very important, and the enthusiasm, because the dynamism, just like others have alluded, shows the culture and the communities that are involved, whether they be in Jangis. And I also think that from the administrative points of view, they're also on the territorial level. Some of the governors are implicated. I know that for Cotton Sport in particular, you see a heavy involvement with the governor of the Northern Province. I think with Bambutos, you have an emblematic governor who is quite Anglophone, so you have seen him with PWD Bamenda. I'm pretty sure you will see him also with Bambutos because the team is coming from the Western region. So I think the dynamism, the enthusiasm shows that sports is a really important factor, and that all around the boards on territorial integrity, I think sports is something that's unique to Cameroonians, in particular football. And so this enthusiasm is something to be celebrated, as we'll celebrate with the Cameroon Cup today.
Thank you very much. Another Paul Yumbo, you have local expertise, you also have that international know-how. When you look at the way this season is ending, a season that started in turmoil, that inherited so many things, and today you see sports again vibrating in this country. What do you attribute this to?
Thank you, Kylian. I think the public space of Cameroon, like the public space of a lot of African nation states, is one which is in perpetual reconstruction. After our accession to independence, we didn't negotiate the terms of our living together. So this means that classical questions that will occupy the public space in countries that have had a process of nation building that is much longer don't appear at the forefront of problematics here in Cameroon. And the issue of community adherence to certain specific issue areas takes the place of these other traditional topics. And that's what we see today here with football. And it's very interesting how cultural identity is portrayed in the midst of what is going on today. We see the kinds of colors that are used by the different teams. What do these colors mean for different communities? We hear the kinds of songs that they're singing, that supporters are singing. These songs continue to foster a certain feeling of togetherness amongst populations that have been urbanized, because these competitions are taking place in the bigger towns. So you can find your kinsmen in the larger towns. So there's a series of phenomena related to the structure of the public space in Cameroon that make this end of the football season to appear as glowing as it is today.
Now, we're going to talk about sports. Now that this is going on, we have almost forgotten about some other issues that we have, the differences that we have. Sports as a unifying factor, beginning with the political analyst.
Sure. I think sports as a unifying factor is very important, because I think for every nation there are certain cultural or certain emblematic identities that portray or that show the character of the nation or the image of the nation. And I think in particular for Cameroon it's football. Some other countries like Brazil, which identify with football. Some other countries maybe like the USA, we identify with basketball and different things. So I think there's an added value, intrinsic added value in some dynamics that portray a community, that portray a country. I think in the case of Cameroon, I think football is one of the most emblematic things that unites Cameroonians. I think where you can pull together all Cameroonians on one table is probably around the subject of football, where probably everyone is an expert into it. But I mean, football goes way and beyond. I think it's become an investment, just like others said. It's an industry in itself. It's not necessarily just a sport anymore. It's become an industry. And so with all that goes around, it's just the governance that makes sure that the management and the governance of this industry ensures that everything goes around the right way.
Albert, as a political service head, you obviously know also better that football unifies. Football raises traits of enmity. Football does so much to Cameroon like it does to some other countries.
I actually covered the Indomitable Lions for 15 uninterrupted years, and my experience is that nothing united Cameroonians in the diaspora with those back home like football, like sports in general.
Yes.
Because we often talk about football, but a discipline like volleyball has done quite a lot for this country because of our near tradition in appearances at the World Cup level.
Athletics,
not to talk of the African scene. Athletics is another one. So the aspect of Cameroonians in the diaspora thinking same and feeling same like those back home, to me it's magical. The other aspect is that whether you like it or not, when you get to the political scene, there are lots of things that can possibly divide people, be they linguistic, be they religious, be they tribal especially. But sports is that one thing that melts all of that, and you see just one people, one nation. I think that it's something that we have to keep we have to keep, we have to preserve at all costs, because when you see what you see around town, even when you don't belong to the north or the west or Buddha or Garwa, there's always something magical that makes you say, I love what I'm seeing.
That is exact, Albert. And if you go to the far north, you go to the east, you go to the south, you go to the southwest and northwest, people will be watching the final that is going on today. Raymond, Albert just talked about we need to preserve this. How can we preserve this momentum that we have so that it unifies us more?
We organized the AFCON this year, and I think apart from all the slack that we had received politically, internationally, I think it was a moment that Cameroonians celebrated the most. I think on a sporting level, the fact that we even got a bronze medal was enough to be able to quieten spirits. But I think on an organizational level, what we were able to achieve, even in a COVID affected environment or period like we had, look at the amount of tourists that we had, the amount of fans that we had from various nations. If you take even our match against Egypt, for example, in the semi-final, look, I mean, for me, it was a big win diplomatically to be able to have the number of chartered flights that we had.
How do we conserve this? We're going to talk about this in the second topic.
Yes, but now, how do we conserve this? I think Cameroon should be at the forefront of hosting as many events as possible. We have traditional events in Cameroon, for example, the Mount Cameroon Race of Hope. We have the Chantal Biya cycling tour. We have other tournaments, and then, I mean, we are projecting in 2025 to host, I think it's a military
sports.
Yes, military sports events. So, I mean, we preserve this by, I mean, in every 3 years, we should be able to host an international event so that it keeps us at the forefront diplomatically and even geopolitically.
Excellent. Yes, Paul Yombo, how do we keep this when you compare what is happening in Cameroon with what happens around the world?
Sports as a unifying force is strongly predicated upon its capacity to reenact myths, founding myths that exist within a community. Let me give an example. Actually, the biggest sport event, it's disputed amongst the World Cup and the Olympic Games. But the Olympic Games, as in terms of mobilizing people, athletes, and it's larger actually than the World Cup. The Olympic Games, first of all, the name Olympic, it comes from Mount Olympus in Greece, and when you look at the kind of symbolic that is used during the procession of the Olympic Games, it resonates with a certain people of the world, and it portrays what they consider as the origin of humanity. The Olympic flame is Prometheus taking the fire from the gods and bringing it to Earth, and that's why they run around the world. So you see symbolically the fact that every once in a while a certain group of people come and reenact their founding myths. It consolidates their unity, and that's the first thing. So it means that for Cameroon to continue reaping the benefits of this kind of sentiment on the long run, we need to institutionalize the elements that resonate with our mythological ideology of the world. See, for example, Mount Cameroon. Mount Cameroon is very symbolic because Mount Cameroon means something to Cameroonians, of course. So
thank you.
That's the first element. The second element would be to transfer, because that's at the organizational, the pre-tournament level. The second element is continuing, because as a nation, we need moments where we look at each other and where we commune with one another. And that's what sports does perfectly well. It brings us all from the different walks of life where we have, especially in an internationalized world where we're made to look outside, we look inside, and we look at each other. And the way we do this during sports is by organizing different groups that will root for one team or root for another team. And the main rallying issue here, like I said, like everyone said since the beginning, was actually community at the first. But community can be transformed to other forms of solidarity and loyalty once the existence of these teams, as it's starting to happen in Cameroon, starts spanning from decade to decade, from generation to generation.
Thank you very much. And with that, we're going to take you to our next topic, the main point of focus on Press Hour today, which is sports as leading soft power. We're just going to transit from sports at the national level to sports at the international level. But just after this interlude. Now we're going to look at sports as soft power, that is even overriding other forms of power around the world. Hard power, which refers to war, economic sanctions, and some other coercive measures that people have set themselves. Today we have what's called soft power, and it's gaining ground. Sports is one of them, and we even think that sports is leading in that category of soft power. We're going to get it from experts. And I just turn to Paul Yombo, who is an international relations expert, to define what soft power is in contrast to hard power.
When you look at the origins of the study of international relations, the study of international relations began after the First World War. In 1916 in Scotland at the University of Aberystwyth, Warsaw. And the main focus at that time was, why did we enter the First World War? How can we avoid this from coming back? And that means that the discipline xeroxed onto the origins of war and the means of warfare. And so from the beginning of the 20th century right up to the end of the Cold War, high politics, that means issues where we're going into global wars, where the acceleration of technological advancement meant that humanity reached the point where we could actually be at the brink of the destruction of the planet through the nuclear war. And so that kind of issue was at the center of the study of international politics. At the end of the Cold War, it ushered in a new era. An era which was a more Pacific era, which was defined by international scholars as the era of complex interdependence, where the global Western agenda had actually defeated somewhat the agenda of the socialist Soviet republics of the world. And in this new pacified world, the means of warfare or the means of competition between states that were classically used became obsolete. America and China have more common interests than the Soviet Republic and the USA had during the Cold War. And in this new era, the ways in which states would compete with one each other morphed from the military front to the economic, strategic, and cultural front. America became a global hegemony by actually using its cinema, by using its music, by using its culture to infuse the ways of living of the population. And so soft power is that non-coercitive means of influencing someone. Power being the capacity to make someone do something he wouldn't do without your intervention. And so you can make someone do something by coercion, by military power, or you can make someone do something by influencing his perception of reality.
Yes, that's hard power.
And yes, hard power is using coercion to make someone do something.
Yes.
Soft power is making someone do something by influencing the way he sees the world.
Wow.
The way he sees himself in the world and the way he sees general interactions in the world.
And I have this definition which coincides, actually agrees with what you're saying. If soft power is the ability to set the agenda in ways that shape the preferences of others to suit yours. That is exactly it. Now, let us know what are the examples of what we can call, apart from the sports we're talking about, soft power.
There are multiple examples of soft power. I can give a very prominent study that happened in America. After the Second World War, political scientists from Princeton University asked Americans what was the major power in shaping the outcome of the Second World War. 80% of Americans answered the Soviet Republic, because those who study the Second World War know that millions of Russians died fighting Hitler's forces. Millions of Russians.
So people should not won't be put into that type of experience again, of fighting and killing others.
Yes, that's maybe on the normative level, but here I'm purely on illustrating soft power.
Yeah.
So after the end of the First World War, the Second World War, so we're in 1945 here, a study was made in a poll on American population. 80% of American population deemed that they owe their win in the Second World War to Russia. 50 years later, in 1997, a same study was made on the American population, and the same question was asked, and now 80% of the population deemed that the victory in the Second World War was thanks to the American intervention. And so from 1945 to 1997, the public opinion in America and around the world completely flipped on the subject of who won, who made us win the Second World War.
Okay.
What happened from 1945 to 1997? Hollywood.
Exactly.
G.I. Joe.
Exactly.
Images portraying American soldiers
Exactly.
in Normandy, and that completely shifted the way the world saw the Second World War.
Okay.
That's an example of soft power.
From film and media. Yes,
I
Albert.
think there are quite some very practical examples which go beyond sports. Music is one. You know, a lot of music that we listen today, R&B and others, have a great influence from the United States. ICT is another. You know, just one technical fault, like the other time in the US with Facebook, all of us were in trouble, for instance. So I think that that is where lots of first world countries are making a difference, and where countries like Africa have a lot of work to do by looking at our own potentialities and see where we have some preferential advantages. You know, lots of people will tell you about what is typically African that you can sell to the world, that you can use to influence the world. Sports is doing that very well today across the world, and so those who are leading in the sports world will obviously have that power that we are talking about.
That is right.
And that's why when you look at players who are celebrated, just the transfer of Lionel Messi from Barcelona to Paris
Saint-Germain.
You saw how many of Lionel Messi's gadgets were sold. Across French territory.
I bought a tracksuit of Paris Saint-Germain. Now, no, strongly speaking, I did, because you have Kylian Mbappe who is there. You have Messi who is there. So I did that. Give us some other examples that sports, Raymond, has actually projected and changed the agenda of the way we look at the world.
I'll give you two. In the early 2000s, Russia discovered that it had a huge energy potential. I'm an avid viewer of sports, especially Champions League matches, and as far back as 2002, 2003, I started seeing Gazprom commercials on the UEFA Champions League matches, and it continued until they even became, by 2008, a prominent sponsor of UEFA. So it was no big surprise when Russia in 2011 won the bid to host the World Cup in 2018. Also, if you look at 2005, 6, 7, Qatar Airways. Qatar Airways was able to draft at the time a hot basketballer, God rest his soul, that's Kobe Bryant, and he was later on joined in 2009, 2010 by Lionel Messi, and there were Qatar Airways ads on nearly every sporting platform.
Yes.
Qatar was preparing its way slowly into having its bid to host the World Cup that we have this year. Qatar today will be talked about more than United Arab Emirates, more than Saudi Arabia, more than Iran, more than Iraq, simply because they are hosting the World Cup. And if you look at even the shift of power in that same region, Israel has all these countries as its neighbors, but Israel plays for UEFA. These other countries play for the Asian Football Confederation.
That is right. We also know that even at the level of Cameroon, like some other countries, when you hear about Argentina, you're thinking of the players. When you hear about Brazil, it's so much about the players who have been so bright around the world. Cameroon, people have been telling me, and you also know they've been telling you, that when you go out there, is that Milla, Roger Milla's country, Paul Anchang?
Sure.
Around the world, sports is actually becoming one of the flags of soft power.
Sure. Politically speaking, just to be able to look at it, when you look at it politically speaking, I'll look at it in a geopolitics, because when we talk about geopolitics, we talk about the integral sovereignty of a nation. What creates the sovereignty of a nation? The communities within that nation. That's what gives you a right to a passport. That's what identifies you. That's when you gather within this extra sporting event, whether it be just like my colleague, my friend here just said, Yombo, the Olympic Games or the World Cup, that's why you wear that jersey. You solidify with that jersey to wear that. And I think in the 1990s with Milla, the 90th World Cup, his emblematic nature, his dynamism, that's what sold Cameroon. I think at a certain point in time in Cameroon, when you traveled around the world, if you just said you were from Cameroon, they would just tell you Roger Milla. And so in terms of soft power, it's that image, the attractiveness of the image that every nation and every government, because soft power, I think it's coined from Mr. Nye, who was an economist from Harvard actually. And so soft power also goes in terms with governance as well, because it's an attractiveness, it's an exemplary example of that nation, of what that nation, that community holds as ideals to be able to attract for economic development as well. We can see with the head of state, we hosted the African Nations Cup, we have this infrastructure. It lets you know in Cameroon, the head of state has put forward a policy where through economic development, we can actually get that in the industry of sport, particularly football. And so that integral sovereignty is something that that they're pushing forward, not to be confused though with the ministries of sovereignty and the governance of sovereignty. For example, in Cameroon, you could have the Ministry of Justice, you could have the Ministry of Defense, you could have the Ministry of Territorial Administration that handle issues of disaster recovery, that handle process of democracy, that handle issues of elections. So you don't want to confuse the soft power, just like he said, with those terms, because it's an attractiveness towards other ideals for economic development within the nation.
Yes, Albert, I'm coming to you. Paul Yombo, there is this, I cannot miss out on this. In the 1990s, America used hard power to attack Iraq and some other countries in that region. And Iran and America have always been at loggerheads in between that 92 and running up to the years 2000, when you had the wars around that place. America had a football match with Iran, a World Cup match with Iran in 1998.
Last group stage.
Yeah, last group stage. That par excellence should be the power of sports that overrides even the hard power that we knew. And they played on the battlefield. Iran won 2-1, Lumo, if I'm not making any mistake. How do you explain this type of union between enemies that is only brought together by sports?
Like we were trying to describe how the international relations scene works. The dominating issues, the issues that structure the international scene, are military issues. First of all, they're military issues. After military issues, they're economic issues. And sports issues, or soft cultural power issues, come and mediate between these two areas of domain. Like the example you gave, but like another example we were talking about, the situation in Qatar or the Middle East. The Middle East countries are generally covered in international media as not respecting human rights, as having issues with women's rights, as having issues of democracy and liberty. When the countries in the Middle East decide to sponsor world sports events like the Grand Prix of Doha, like the World Cup, what they do is that they retake the control of their narrative on their country, and they can decide how to portray themselves on the international scene, and that's how they set the agenda. The second point, directly on the question you asked, is that for countries that are lacking in the military and the economic sense, sports becomes more important. So when, for example, France and Algeria will play, it will be more important to Algeria than to France.
I see.
And you will see it through different ways.
Yes, Albert, I think on the 29th of November this year, America again will play against Iran. We're going to focus attention again and see how sports brings these two people together.
Of course, like he did say, and Iran will take the game probably more serious than the United States. That will be, in my opinion, very much on the defensive. That okay, it's fair play. You could win like you could lose, because they have something to protect, which has to do with democracy, which has to do with the acceptance of the outcome of results, because they want to showcase fair play. And it happens like that everywhere in the world. You as a Cameroonian, you wouldn't want to lose should we play Somalia, but Somalia will obviously prepare the game more than we shall, because even when we want to be as serious as possible, there is always in our subconscious mind that we are playing an underdog, you know. So yes, that is it. But what I wanted to say in this perspective is that soft power, incidentally, is very powerful but very fragile. How do you handle it? I very often compare soft power to management of elections.
How about that?
Respect of the rules of the game. He talked about governance issues.
Yeah.
This sports is something that generates a lot of passion, lot of emotions. Today, it's become a sense of identity. Brazilians wouldn't want to lose, because that football is
the identity
of their country.
Yes.
So how you manage football in Brazil, you have been given power, but you must understand that every action you take should be in line with governance, should be in line with seriousness, and so on and so forth. So you, at the end of the day, know that you are dealing with a fragile or a very sensitive aspect of people's life, people's identity, of something that tells of who they are. And that's why very often when some of these teams lose, the coaches and sometimes the FA presidents don't even need to be told to resign.
Yes, they just go by themselves.
They just go. So
yes.
It brings me back to our own situation in Cameroon, which brings us to the issue of respecting the rules of the game.
Yes.
We all know we are celebrating the end of the season today, but you know that the presidents of the federations who will be welcoming the head of state's representative, their mandates were over almost 6 years ago.
Yes.
So how you manage that? We all know the problems we have had with our football, questions of legitimacy and all of that.
Yes.
All of that needs to be well handled, and countries that have done that very, very well have been able to keep sports as a true ambassador.
That is right, Albert. We have about 7 minutes to go to the end of this program, and this is how I want us to end, with the power of sports. Let's look at the development aspect of sports. We just had AFCON in Cameroon, and we have seen what it has given to Cameroon. It happens to every host of an international sporting activities. Let us look at it from the point of view of development. What sometimes politics does not do, sports can do.
Sure, definitely, because what politics cannot do, but definitely politics can inspire through governance. And I think in Cameroon, I'll take Cameroon in particular because we are in Cameroon. I think when you have this infrastructure, that there's a huge investment, and it's sure that it's a huge investment, even though it contradicts a little bit with soft power, because soft power normally is sometimes cost effective. But when you're a less developed country, you invest more to be able to portray the attractiveness and the image of the country, so that you can get the intrinsic added value of that particular country. For example, a country like Cameroon, we have decentralization, and we are trying to portray maybe the culture, and that culture can be sold towards various entrepreneurships in different ways in different communities, whether it be through the culinary, whether it be in different places you could eat eru, and eru is no longer really a culinary dish from the southwest. It's normally now
you're very correct. Talking about decentralization, just being within that framework, sporting infrastructure have been announced for Bamenda, for Marwa, for all of that. That also is part of it.
No, that's definitely part of it, and I think that's the policy. when we talk about in terms of governance, that's the policy. Policy sometimes is put forward, but now later on it's left for the elected and for those in the communities to be able to actually emancipate themselves and actually work towards actually realizing this project. So it does take some time, just like he was saying that he was giving the example, it could take decades for it. So like maybe we had a couple of ages, there were teams from the West Province, now we have teams from the North. So that emancipation, that growth, and with decentralization is what will culminate into the fact of that industry in itself uniting and galvanizing for a dynamism for economic development.
Albert, let us put a finger on some of the infrastructure and other aspects of development that sports have brought to Cameroon in the most recent years.
Well, it is not long ago that all the other disciplines outside football were taking place at the Mateko Sports Complex. Can you imagine that we can go for 1 full year without you hearing the name Mateko or Concord Sports Complex just because of the construction of the sports complex at Wada? It's unbelievable. Not long ago, it was commonplace to hear only the reunification stadium and the Amado Ahijo Stadium. But more and more, we talk more of Japoma. Everybody sees Olembe as a sense of national pride. Not long ago, we were contented with the championship and the national championship with the Cup of Cameroon finales in the different disciplines. But more and more, you have Cameroonians who feel that after hosting the CHAN and the AFCON, he was talking about the Islamic Solidarity Games of 2025. So everybody is dreaming big now. Just because we have seen that with the soft power coming from sports, we can send a strong signal across the world. Everybody felt really like the big boys of the continent after the AFCON.
Exactly, Albert. You are naming some of these infrastructure, the stadia, but linking this stadia, getting into the townships, you have roads, you have even health infrastructure, you have some other aid that have been looked into and constructed because of sports. Albert did not name all the sports infrastructure that have developed in the recent past, Elume. You can complete. You have Garoua, you have Limbe, yes, Kwekong. Yes, can you?
Of hotels and hospitals and all of that.
Yes, I don't think that it will be exhaustive to call on all this infrastructure. But I think what Albert was also trying to add was that we've had roads linking, we've had medical facilities which have been upgraded, we've had also technological facilities. Who thought that the VAR that we see on TV every day, we could have it here for the AFCON? So I think Cameroon too has to walk too on its pace. If you look at the hosting of the World Cup, America started a trend in 1994, and the price of hosting the World Cup went up after South Korea. Only Germany has been able to bring it down.
Yes,
but South Africa, Brazil, Russia, and even Qatar have taken it up. So I think Cameroon, which it means, it's developing its infrastructure based on its own pace. I don't think that forcing Cameroon more than what it can do would be conducive. That's why I was talking about the fact that let us
in itself is surpassing yourself.
Let us develop our infrastructure based on the amount of events that we can host.
Now that will be our last word. Paul, when we talk sports, we talk big sums of money. Can you imagine how much somebody who comes from nowhere without a salary and gets into sports? We're only talking about billions.
Yes. In terms of development strategies, one of the most prominent development strategies is what is called industrializing industries. And industrializing industries is a strategy where a country focalizes a lot of means on one very intensive industry, intensive in terms of input, financial, human resource, and that industry is so big that it induces the development of secondary industries around, and that's the situation of sports. Because for sports hosting events, you need hotels, you need roads, you need hospitals.
Thank you. Anchang, Paul, in terms of money, that is not money that it brings, but money that players have.
Sure. I think the money factor for me it's secondary, because sometimes with the image and the attractiveness of the area or of the ecosystem of the sporting environment is what's actually important to be able to attract the economic development. So sometimes you could invest more to be able to get it back later.
Yes,
you are talking about
yes.
the big spendings. Have you thought about those ordinary Cameroonians you meet at the stadium today? Some who have been keeping their money for this cup final since their teams qualified.
Exactly.
Some have even made sacrifices, maybe not
Yes.
eating regularly, just because
our
they
time,
want to
our
spend.
time is up. Who is the highest paid player in the world, and how much?
Well, it depends.
Give me just one.
Well, it could be Kylian Mbappe at the moment.
How much?
Well, he could be on about 50 million euro per year.
Aye.
That's a Deloitte estimate.
Thank you. I cannot convert that high. I wish I had that in Safe France.
Without coming
Thank you.
to what
namesake.
Yes, it's my namesake.
Without coming to what you often have with
Yes.
as a brand ambassador.
Yes.
He may take that a little more higher.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Aben Jembonde, Paul Anchang, Paul Yombo, Raymond Elume. Ladies and gentlemen, we are glad you were there for us. We hope that we enlightened today. Thanks for watching. That was how we saw Press Hour today. Have a wonderful day.